Welcome back, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Sister Girl Book Club interviews. I'm your host, Tiffany Grantham, and I have a special guest with me for the month of April, Poetry Month. His name is Curtis Hill, but the household name you will remember is SP the Writer. Hello
Good,
and good
good
morning.
morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Yes, thank you so much for joining me this morning. It is early, but here we are.
Listen, no doubt, the early bird gets the worm, as they say.
Yes, it does. All right. Well, first, your name is Curtis Hill, but tell
Yes.
everyone how you got the name SP the Writer. Because when I first heard it, I thought of SP the Ghost,
Yes, my guy.
Styles P. Yes.
Right.
So,
Yeah, so SP the writer just came from me writing poetry but not wanting to perform. And
okay.
so there was a guy that actually called me SP the first time. He called me a silent poet because I wouldn't spit something for him. So he's like, man, you're just a silent poet. And so then that just kind of morphed over the years into SP the 3000, SP 12,000, all these different weird names. And then I just kind of settled in with SP the writer. So that didn't necessarily like pigeonhole me into poetry per se.
Okay.
But it also then was a conversation starter because then people were like, well, what does the SP stand for? So then we were able to kind of get into those things.
Okay. Nice. So, how long have you been writing? And how did it come about that they knew that you wrote, but you didn't want to spit anything?
So I mean, I've been writing since I was a kid. Um, there was a cartoon called Bobby's World, where
I
this little,
remember
you
Bobby's
remember?
World.
So
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I want to have adventures in my head. So that's kind of when I started writing like short stories.
Mm,
But I didn't start like seriously writing until probably a little post college.
okay.
I was gonna put out a book called Inkspired.
Okay.
And I was on Facebook telling everybody like, "Yo, we're gonna have a book signing at a bowling alley. It's gonna be different." Da 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 da. Da. And so you know
Hmm.
how life gets in the way, and then you just wind up not doing something, and so then 10 years or more passes by. And so then one day I was just like, I want to have a show. And so once I started Inkspired, that's when I really really probably my second show is where I got really, really serious about writing, especially for stage.
Okay. So talk about those shows. Like, how did those come about, and who's performing since you aren't?
So, I just decided I wanted to do something one day. I wanted to do something with my poetry. I know I had been writing for a long time. I knew I was, a pretty decent writer. I was
Mhm.
playing semi-professional poker kind of at the time. I was going around the United States playing in poker
Oh,
tournaments,
nice.
and had planned on playing in the World Series of Poker in 2018
Mhm.
that summer. And so it was like February, early February of 2018, and I just was like, man, like I would love to do something with my poetry this year. And so I was like, I'm gonna put out my book. And then I quickly was just like something inside was like, nah, we not doing that. Let's do something fun. And so that's how Inkspired the show was
Oh,
born. And then from there, it really was just me saying, okay, well, I'm not performing, so I got to go find some performers. And so in the very, very first show, there was only three poets would actually tell me yes. Like nobody else wanted to perform somebody else's work. It was so hard getting artists to be a part of that show because in the poetry world, like we know that it's theater,
mhm.
right? But in the poetry
Mhm.
world, it's not the norm. So there was a guy named Lee Chapman, which is my guy,
Okay.
Ashley Connors, the first lady, as I call her, and then D.S. Will, who was another super dope poet. Those were the three that brought my work to life on August 4th, 2018. And so from there, people were just like, oh, one, he can write. Two, this is a different kind of poetry show. And then, having those particular performers were people in the Raleigh area that were well respected by other poets. So then that just started kind of opening things up for me. And so now, man, I don't even know how many poets I've worked with in shows, but I know I have a long list of poets now, probably close to 30 or 40 that have told me like I can work with them. And that's not even counting the ones that I've worked with already.
Oh, wow. So for one, it just all it takes is a little bit of courage, right?
Yeah.
An idea and a little bit of courage. So did you, when you started this, did you think it was going to get to where it is now? Like when they were telling
No,
you no?
No, I didn't. So it was only really supposed to be one show. I was like, I'm gonna, because I stopped playing poker, cold turkey. I
Mhm.
stopped playing basketball. Like, I stopped pretty much everything that I was doing in my life to say, okay, if I'm gonna do this show, let's focus in for 6 months, have this show, and we'll see what happens. So if it was, if it went really, really well, I was gonna be like, oh yeah, of course, like let's, keep doing this, but I'm gonna start back doing my other stuff.
Mhm.
But I really wasn't set on like turning this into like a thing. But after the first
Mhm.
show, I was just like, yeah, I'm done because I lost a lot of money. And Crystal the Muse, she was just like, nah, like we got something here. And so then another event producer, Tim Johnson, he wound up hitting me up. He called me on the phone the next day. I was like, I heard you had 100 people at your show the first night. And I was like, yeah, it didn't go too well. He was like, no, like that's phenomenal. So he literally made me meet him at Cheesecake Factory that night, and we sat in the parking lot till 2 o'clock in the morning. And he was explaining to
Wow.
me what I had, what it could turn into, da da da. Da. So 100 days later, we had the second show, and that second show is where I realized, like, oh, this can be something.
So your first show, 100 people. 100 days later, you have your second show.
Yeah, and we had a little over 200 in the room uh, in the second show, and so it was the atmosphere was just electric. Um, it was crazy, and so I had this piece called Black Conscience in the show
Mhm.
where we had a white guy named Colin Watson. That's my guy. He goes by Spoken Watson, and then Lee Chapman, who I mentioned earlier. They performed this piece where they were both dressed in full KKK garb, and so when they come
Oh.
out, they march out and then they're on stage. And as they're going through the piece in the beginning, like they're saying a whole lot of racist, harsh stuff. So they're like the same person. But if you're sitting in the room, you obviously realize there's a black guy under one of these with some locks, right? So
Right?
as the poem goes along, you then realize that Lee, the black guy, is the conscience of Colin, who's the white
Mm.
guy playing the white character. And so it was just this huge piece. And that once that piece was over, that's when I was just like, okay, I'm looking around the room, I'm seeing the reactions. I was like, yeah, we got something different here.
Okay, so we jumped into the show, but I want to back up a little bit
Okay,
because
let's
I want
back up.
everybody to really understand what you're doing.
Okay.
So you are a writer, a poet. You put
Yes.
on this show. Explain the show because I've been to the show.
I
It is it was amazing. And I
appreciate it.
enjoyed it that night. I told you then, and I was very, very proud of you. But I want you to give like from marketing to the actual show, like describe to people what's happening at your show.
Got you. So the show is anchored in poetry, which is my poetry that I write, of course. But
Mhm.
we put a lot of things around it. So it's a fashion show in a sense because everybody gets dressed up. I'll have a tux on or a suit.
Mhm.
Crystal, who hosts the show as well, she'll change clothes 3, 4 times during the show now.
Yes, and she looked
Um,
fabulous.
Absolutely. So you got people that are like showing off what they're wearing. Before the show, we have an art gallery. So we'll have
Mhm.
local artists that come in that are super dope artists that have their actual physical paintings, and
Mhm.
they'll exhibit those paintings and they'll also sell them. And they come in for free. We don't charge them to come in, and they keep 100% of everything they make. So that's one of the things
Mhm.
that we want to make sure artists are making money, and we don't want to take away from them.
Right.
We've also added, which wasn't there when you came, but
Okay.
we have a red carpet pre-show. So now we do interviews with the sponsors, with the VIP guests, and some of the special guests. And as we grow, that'll turn into like really like an Oscars type feel. So when you come in, it'll be like, so this what it must be like to be at the Oscars. So you have all that
Mhm.
going on for a couple of hours before the show even starts. Once the show starts, we oscillate back and forth. So I know a lot of people that have been to poetry events. You sit there, you're listening to poet at the poet at the poet at the poet at the poet, which for
Mhm.
me is great, and people who
Mhm.
love poetry. But we really wanted to attract a new audience to poetry and to art. So what we did is we broke up the poetry. So you'll have about 2 to 4 poems in a row, And then we have a live band, we have musical guests, and so there'll be a couple of performances with that. Then Crystal or whoever's co-hosting to come on stage. Our last show we had Rod Minger out of Atlanta. He's a comedian. So
Hmm.
then we know Crystal's already naturally funny, but then
Yes.
you bring in a like trained like comedian who travels the country. Now you have a whole different element to it. So it's kind of a comedy show as well,
Hmm.
with all the hosting moments and things of that nature. And then you just oscillate back and forth all night, and it's been spectacular. So we do a lot of business connectivity and networking. So it's a lot going on with the show, but everything's anchored in the poetry, and then we just kind of built everything else around it.
It's an absolutely amazing event. So, is there anything else in the Durham area like that, the Raleigh Durham area, that like a show that you put on?
There's nothing in the nation from what I'm being told. I've been looking and I've talked to some really big poets that have traveled not only the nation but the world.
Hmm.
In poetry specifically, there's nothing else like what we're doing, from the sense of one poet writing everything and not performing any of it. And then also to having all of those elements tied in at the scale that they're tied in at. There's not another one, thankfully. And so our biggest show has been 500 people so far, and
Wow.
that's all been word of mouth. So now you spoke about marketing. Now I'm doing a lot of studying
Hmm.
about marketing, advertising. So it's like, all right, let's put some dollars to use and see if we can pull out 3,000 people, and then see if we can, start touring this thing as well. So that's kind of where things are now.
Oh wow. So if you do 3,000 people, will it still be in the Raleigh Durham area? Will you have a space for that?
Yeah, there is a space for that. The only space that I know of is at the convention center where we've been. They have a huge ballroom that you can open up.
Hmm.
Um, there may be one other space, but it's not too many spaces that can hold that size. But they're also building the Omni Hotel down in Raleigh as well. So I
Okay.
don't know what they're gonna wind up putting up in there. So we'll see.
Okay. And see, a little bit of faith, a little bit of courage. And I think it also, just from hearing your story, it also is important to have people around you to recognize what you have. And that's going to
Yeah,
genuinely support you.
yeah. I think a lot of people. I think sometimes because I was scared, right? So I did it
Mhm.
scared. But I was like, okay, I know like I can write, you know what I mean? So let's do something that I haven't seen done before. Tim, I knew him, but I didn't really like we had been out of contact for years. But what I always tell people, and I tell poets this all the time, like when you're performing, I don't care if you're performing in a backyard barbecue, if you're performing at an open mic or whatever, you always need to be on because you
Mhm.
never know who's watching.
Right.
And when people are watching with a keen eye and they say, you know what, that person right there actually has something, then yo, people will call you, people will email you, people will bump into you on the street and be like, yo, I heard you were doing X, like, how can I help? And so that's kind of been the mode that things have kind of moved in. And so I'm always making sure that I'm moving to excellence, that I'm keeping my word, from keeping my face straight with business. And
Mhm.
so I've been blessed to work with some amazing, amazing, amazing people and have a whole lot of people support me on the back end as well.
Yes. So, talking a little bit more about the show or about the writing for the show. So, how do you determine how do you pick your poets? And then once you pick your poets, how do you decide who's going to perform which poem?
So the picking the poets is like the most excruciating part because typically, um, probably about half of the people that I've reached out to for Inkspired after the first show tell me no. So
Mhm.
I'll see them on YouTube. So Roddy, she performed at the show that you were in. I mean, that you came to.
Mhm.
Roddy's from New Jersey. I saw her on YouTube and was like, oh my God, she's dope. And so I reached out and she was just like, yeah, I would be down to do that. And so I'm like, all right, cool. But I meet poets at different events. So I do a lot
Mhm.
of scouting in person. I was up in Baltimore a few weeks ago for the Women of the World Poetry Show.
Mhm.
And I specifically went to see two poets live in person. One of them I thought was going to win, and she came in second.
Okay.
Um, but then I just have a conversation, and that conversation has kind of changed over the years because
Okay. How so?
I used to be like, yo, listen, my name's SP the writer. I got this, this super dope event. And, it has a twist to it though. I write everything, and so I was talking to them poet to poet. And what I realized, because I was getting so many no's, and I'm like, dang, like, why am I getting so many no's? I
Mhm.
realized I needed to talk to the actor inside of the poets. So now I say, hey, my name's SP the writer. I got this dope event that I would love for you to be a part of. I look for poets who are also interested in acting. So now they're not looking at it as, oh, I wouldn't let nobody else perform my poetry. Why do I want to perform
Mhm.
yours? Now they're just like, oh yeah, I've done some acting before, or I want to do some acting. And so then from there, I send them a few pieces so they can actually get a feel for the type of things that I can write, my writing style, etc. And then if they say
Mhm.
yes, they go on a long roster that I have. And so when a show is kind of coming up, I just I don't know, it's kind of an innate thing where I just kind of like get this feeling like, okay, I want this show to feel like this person and this
Okay.
person and this person. And so then I start kind of saying, okay, let me make sure that, if there's six poets in a show, I don't want three of those poets to be the same type poet. I
Mhm.
want them to be different so that way the audience, they may not connect with, Sarah, but they may connect with Bob, you know what I mean?
Right.
Um, so then from there, once I get yeses, we get contracts, all that good stuff. Typically, I'll then sit down and write the show. Now I'm moving away from that model, which I can get into, but typically I would sit down and write the show, and I would write those pieces specifically as much as possible for that particular poet, based off of their cadence, based off of how I've seen them
Mhm.
perform, based off of certain topics that I may want to bring out and see, okay, I want to stretch somebody a little bit here, or, I want them to stay in their normal, bag that I've seen them in, and just kind of go from there. But now I'm writing a lot in between shows. Um,
Okay.
so coming up to the next show, I'll have 50 new pieces that I can then choose from. So now it'll be more so about me saying, okay, I have these pieces. Okay, these three pieces I want this particular poet to do. Let me see if they're available. And then I'll
Mhm.
start kind of going down the list from there. Um, and I guess the only other thing that I really consider when booking poets too is if I want some people from out of town, I need to make sure, from a budgetary standpoint, like, okay, who do I want to come from out of town? I can't have all 10 of these poets come from out of town. So which two or three do I want? And then we just kind of move from there.
Okay. Has there ever been a time with the long list of poets that you have, has there ever been a time where you were unsure about whether they would be able to perform your piece the way
No,
you saw it specifically in your mind?
no, because I'm not, and I told somebody this before, like I always have an idea of what it sounds like if they perform it, but I'm not married to that idea.
Okay.
They get about 90, I say about 90 to 95% of creative control of how they want to perform the piece. And obviously we go through some rehearsals, and Crystal has a whole lot to say in rehearsals, and I have a little bit to say depending on what's going on. Sometimes the other poets critique each other as well. But I'm not married to the idea of how it sounds in my head because I don't perform. So I need them to do what they do, and I if I hire somebody, it's because I think they're super dope. So
Okay. And we talked, excuse me, we talked about this a little bit, talking about how important it is for the people on your team. Can you talk about some of the people that are on your team that you work with?
yeah, so of course Crystal the Muse, she is co-producer, co-director. She's the host. She used to do a lot of administrative work when we first started, so she's done quite a lot of things, and people know her as one of the faces of Inkspired. So it's been super super dope to have her. Um, Joe Niece, she really does not. She's probably gonna kill me if I'm like saying her name out loud. She wants to be like super super background, But
Mm-hmm.
Joe has been with us as the day of coordinator for the last couple of shows. And she's done a fantastic job. And me and her were talking not too long ago, and she was just like, "Yo, like you literally threw me to the wolves. Like, I need to have a deeper understanding of how your mind works, what you want done, how you want it done, so I can better assist." And so, me and her have had a lot of conversations over the past couple months, really about where where my vision is for Inkspired. So
Mm-hmm.
eventually she'll kind of be the brain for me, and she won't even have to ask me anything because she'll already know. So she'll kind of be running the ship that way. That frees me up,
Mm-hmm.
a lot, and it also continues to keep Crystal free from having such a heavy load. Um, Shanice Green is another person. She came on about a little over a year ago. I met her, and she's more so I would call a consultant in a way. She talks to me from a super high level, from like a political, from like a citywide, countywide, statewide standpoint
Mm-hmm.
about what Inkspired is as an entity and what it means to the city, what it means to other art organizations, what it means to mental health, etc. So she kind of like when she talks to me, I'm just like, oh, I didn't think about that like that.
Mm-hmm.
So she's been a really great help and instrumental in inviting me into certain rooms as well. And so there's some other people that help day of, but those are right now the three main people that are really kind of in my pocket. There's also another Crystal. I can't forget her, Crystal Taylor, and also Tim Johnson. They mentor me pretty heavily behind the scenes. Tim more so with like what to do with the event itself,
Mm-hmm.
and then Crystal more so on the sponsorship side. She's been very instrumental in all the sponsorships and grants that I've been able to get based off of her mentorship with that. So that's kind of like my little team that's been forming over the past few years.
Small crew, but big impact, and a lot of women on the team. So I love it.
Yes, yes, my black women gotta love
Okay, so my next question for you is for SP the writer, you as a writer. So how much time do you dedicate to your writing?
them. So I'm dedicating a lot more time to my writing lately. Before it's been crazy. I would literally sit down and take 2 weeks and write the whole show, and then I wouldn't write again for the most part until it was time for the next show. Um, and
In
so I
between
was
that
telling,
time, are you reading and like just experiencing life to prepare for the next show, or you just cold turkey?
well, what I would do, and like most writers, I'll jot stuff down. I would jot little
Mhm.
notes down, and I would like be kind of pulling in all the inspiration, and then it would just seem like, okay, all right, it's time to let all of this flow out. But I realized that's not the way that I need to be doing it moving forward. Um, One, because I'm building my catalog. And so my catalog of poems that have been on stage is like over 60, maybe even 70 now. And so
Mhm.
then I have like another 25 or so that have not touched stage. But I want to build my catalog up to like 300, close to 400 pieces. But in order for me to do that, I have to write on a consistent basis. And so I started out this year great. I was like, yep, first of the year, let's go. And then, I pumped out. I was writing, like, my goal is to write like a piece a week. So
Mhm.
that puts me in a space where I don't have to sit there and write a poem a day like I would do in a 2 week block when I'm writing a show.
Right.
Um, and so I was doing really well, kind of fell off a little bit. I'm not too far behind, but I'm still a little far
Mhm.
behind. So now what I'm doing is like, okay, if I can take 30 minutes and I can sit in front of a notebook and I can write, then I'm good. I've never had problems with writer's block, so that's not an issue. Um, but the more time I have, the better, obviously, because then I can kind of sit and I can let some things marinate a little bit more. I can stare at a blank page for 2 hours without putting a word on it and then say, all right, let's go. So yeah, I'm starting to take more time now, and I'm trying to find like the crevices. So like if I go to the airport and I got a flight and I got an hour before it's time to board, all right, let's write. You know what I'm saying? If I'm on a plane, like, yeah, let's write. or
Mhm.
if I'm, at some sort of appointment, but I'm waiting and I got 15 minutes, let's write. But then it's like this fight back and forth because I'm reading so much right now, like super heavy into reading. It's like, do I write or do I read? Like, because I like to do both. So I just gotta stay disciplined with the writing to make sure that I'm able to hit my goal by the end of the year. Because if I can do that once, then I know as my life gets busier, then
Mhm.
that'll be like my norm. It's like, oh, I can pump out 50 pieces a year as long as I make sure that I stay on this writing regimen.
Right. About discipline. Not perfection, but just discipline.
Yeah, perfection is such a I don't know. I'm in my mind, right? I'm a perfectionist,
Mhm.
but I don't really I don't really act on that perfection that's like in my head. It's like,
Okay.
yo, this is gonna be what it's gonna be, and is the feeling there? Is the emotion there? Is the connection there? If that's there, then I'm good because you can sit and try to perfect something all day long. And oh, you know what? I'm gonna turn this double entendre into a triple entendre, and the audience they probably ain't even gonna notice that. You know what I'm saying? You sit here and you perfected something for 6 months. This one little piece you're trying to do, and
Mhm.
then you get the gratification of it, but then nobody else does.
Right. Your audience
And so
doesn't.
they don't get it all. So I'm trying to, even when I'm writing for shows, trying to write from a standpoint of, yes, do I like it? For sure, but not so being so selfish and trying to perfect something that can't be perfected anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, so is there a way that people, if they, people haven't gone to a show yet,
hmm
is there a way that they can see your work, like the work you've written, where they can read it,
So I really don't
or they can
post a
only
whole lot of,
experience it?
yeah, I really don't post a lot of stuff, but what I have done, excuse me, is if people DM me or they email me,
Mhm.
I'll send you links and people can like actually see because I have all of the poems from past shows. So I've sent out
Mhm.
links to people quite a bit. So if you follow me on Instagram at SP the writer, or if you email me at inkspiredsp@gmail.com and just say,
Mhm.
hey, like I saw you, online, I want to hear some of your work. I'll send you over 3, 4, 5 poems. I'll send you as many poems as you want to hear. Um, but yeah, I just don't really put my work out too much. I started putting a couple snippets here and there on, online,
Mhm.
but I really want people to come to a show and experience what it is. And we've even rebranded that. Like it was just Inkspired. Now it's the Inkspired Experience because it is absolutely just that.
And experience, yes.
Yeah.
All right. Where is there anything else that's coming up for you that you want the people to know about?
Man, listen, I'm out here. I call myself a support whore. I'm out here supporting any and everybody's events that I can. I'm at people's book signings. I'm doing everything that I can to make sure that people understand that I practice what I preach. Um,
Mhm.
I have an Inspired show, once a year, sometimes twice a year. Um, so that leaves a whole lot of other days where I'm not actively having my own event. So I just try to make sure I'm at other people's events. I was at a gala last night,
Mhm.
and it was an Earth Day gala, but they're just talking about sustainability, not just with the earth, but also within human beings.
Right.
Um, Met this well, I didn't meet her, but I actually heard her speak for a little bit. She's 11 years old, and she's invented three sustainability toys that are
Oh,
going to launch in June in over 400 Whole Foods. 11 years old. And so for me, like in supporting that event, then I was able to come across her and hear her story. And it's just like that type of stuff inspires me. So yeah, I'm just out in the streets, man. If you got an event you want me to support, DM it to me, and I'm gonna put it on my calendar. I always tell people if I'm in town, then I'll make it. If not, then I had to catch you next time. But yeah, I don't really have anything that's coming up right now. Later this year though, and this I haven't told anybody this, so this is kind of exclusive. Um,
ooh,
Later this year, I am looking to release my first writing class on on writer's block. So it'll be called Writers Unblocked. I think that's going to be what the title of it is. And so we'll kind of go through and I'll break down what my writing process is, but then also the psychology behind why people actually don't have writer's block and how to actually kind of get through that to write more. We'll get to the writing better part later, but first we need to get people to writing more. So look for that hopefully later on this year.
Oh, that's absolutely wonderful. And I'm so happy for you.
I appreciate it.
A class after my own heart as a writer. So
Right.
yes. With that event, will you be posting it anywhere like on your IG or a website?
Yeah, so spthewriter.com. It'll more than likely it'll definitely be there. And I may have another landing page for it as well. But spthewriter.com, I'll throw some stuff out on social media. You can also keep up with me through my text list. If you text the word poetry to 888-549-0199. Again, that's poetry to 888-549-0199. You'll be able to keep up with what I got going on. When the Inkspired show comes, when I drop the class, and then sometimes I'll send out other people's events as well, so people can kind of stay updated on what's going on in the different cities, so people can be support whores like me. But yeah, I will drop that later this year. I'm looking forward to that. I'll have a writing journal along with it that people can purchase. The class will be free. People can purchase the journal if they want to. And the plan is right now to drop my first ebook of poetry that will come free along with that journal. So yeah, we're working on a couple of things over here behind the scenes in between now and next June, when we'll probably have the next Inkspired show.
That is absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for just coming up here and letting me interview you and sharing your talent and your show. I didn't know your last show had 500 people, so I am just over the moon happy for
Actually,
you.
it was the show that you were at. That was 500 people in the room.
That was and it was a lot of people.
Yeah,
So yes,
that was the one. Yeah, it was crazy.
that was a great show.
I
Yes, yes,
appreciate it.
yes. Thank you again. Thank you so much, Curtis. SP the writer, ladies and gentlemen. He is amazing. So please, again, visit his website. Keep in touch to look forward to a new show. That's the website. And
Absolutely.
this is his Instagram.
Absolutely.
And
I
yes, please
appreciate you
keep in
having me
touch.
on too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You all have a wonderful day.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.